set to unveil his budget blueprint on Wednesday, a plan that could put members of his own party on edge when it comes to proposed cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Administration officials say the president will echo the themes laid out in last year's negotiations with House Speaker John Boehner, among them a call for new taxes on the wealthy and fresh investments in the nation's infrastructure. In exchange for added revenue, the president is reportedly open to reducing cost of living payments for Social Security benefits, something known as chained CPI. He'll also propose higher income beneficiaries' pay for more Medicare coverage. Pre-kindergarten education would be made available across the nation, and tobacco products would be taxed more to pay for it. Over a decade, annual deficits would be reduced by $1.8 trillion. Those reductions would top $4.3 trillion once other reductions already agreed to by Congress take effect. The president will propose more than $600 billion in new revenues. Nearly 80% of the savings would come through spending cuts.
Now this is a real budget.
That's a real story.
I don't agree with everything in there. I think he needs to go further in some areas. I don't like the new tax increases, but that's a real budget, Josh, to start negotiations with. That's exciting. We've got a place to start now.
Well, it is. I mean, this is basically reviving the last offer that he had made to John Boehner last year, minus some of the tax savings that we had from the fiscal cliff deal.
Yeah.
So what's significant about it, I think, is that it's not the kind of lefty wish list to compete with a righty wish list. It's at least some effort to move toward the middle and to offer up these things. The Democrats on the left are going to be very upset about not just chained CPI, but also some of these Medicare cuts, as a way of saying, look, I'm serious about negotiating. Are you Republicans serious about negotiating?
And there are, Richard, so many places for Republicans to come back and say, we don't like this, but over here's fascinating. I read, I'm pretty
Do you think
excited.
they're going to do that?
Do you think Republicans are?
Yeah. Do you think they're going to say, this is a good starting point and let's actually get down to negotiation? Or are they going to say, it's not serious enough and we want 2 times, 3 times?
I think it depends on how. I mean, I don't know what's going on behind closed doors right now because this story at least caught me by surprise yesterday. I'll tell you, 3 weeks ago, the very conservative Republicans that were saying on air, no, we will never raise another penny of taxes, said, if the deal's big enough, we'll do it.
Well, look, I think it's smart politics to say, hey, we put entitlements on the table, we put out a budget, so this whole thing about we don't put out budgets, we don't deal with entitlements, it's out. But as a negotiating strategy, we've seen the White House do this before. They're negotiating against themselves because Republicans, I think, will do what you said, which is thank you very much, and now let's move on to the next phase. And that's always been the problem for this White House.
We'll see. Sam, what do you think?
I think Richard's probably right here, where you end up having reestablished a different middle ground, right? It might work in terms of the public relations. That's why, keep in mind, budgets are mostly symbolic documents. But if you start from the middle ground as your baseline for negotiation, that only means that you can move one way, and that's closer to the Republican side. That said, having read the New York Times piece, which has the details on this, he's offered all this stuff before, so I don't know how mad the left is going to be. He's offered chain CPI before. He's offered to means test parts of Medicare before. The extent of the Medicare cuts, $400 billion, as it's detailed in the piece, is probably a little bit higher than I thought the White House had gone before. But this is the general framework of every grand bargain offer that Obama and Boehner have been at the end.
That's right, but remember, there's something different about this negotiation, too. Ordinarily, the president introduces his budget first, then the two parties do in Congress. That got flipped around this year because Obama delayed. So you've had the right-wing budget from the House, you've had slightly left-wing budget from the Senate. Now Obama comes last, and what he proposes looks like a compromise. So they've at least positioned themselves between the two poles and therefore look a little bit more reasonable. It's not kind of giving away the farm in the first.
Yeah. And also, Josh and I were talking about this, it replaces sequestration with different cuts, which I think might actually get some political traction. I think you're starting to see sequestration take a real hit out in the communities, and congressmen talking to local press are getting concerned about it. So there might be some desire to actually think about a replacement going forward, and this might be the document to latch onto.